Okay, hello and welcome to MSDynamicsWorld.com's Fall CRM Webcast Series. I'm Jason Gumpert and I am joined today by Ivan Kurtev, CRM Solution Architect at HP Enterprise Services. Ivan is a returning speaker for us and we're really glad to have him back to speak today on a topic that I think is capturing the interest of CRM architects and technical leads across the ecosystem right now. We invite you to add your feedback and ask questions today during the session. You can use the Q&A block that you'll see in the webcast session here, or the chat as well. And if you want to tweet your thoughts and questions, we are going to be monitoring the hashtag MSDWCRM. So, without further delay, please allow me to introduce our speaker, Ivan Kurtev. Ivan, are you there?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Jason. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for attending today's session. I'm very excited about the attendance and about the opportunity to talk on this topic. I will start with a very quick introduction. My name is Ivan Kurtev. I am, as Jason said, CRM Solution Architect with the Global Business Processes as Service practice at HP Enterprise Services. And our practice offers a complete suite of cloud and global implementation services for Microsoft Dynamics CRM. I would be happy to connect with everyone who's attending this webcast today or is viewing the recording later on Twitter or LinkedIn. And you can also visit our blog, the Application Services blog for HP Enterprise Services. Our agenda today will start with a quick release management primer. And first, let me pause for a second and talk a little bit about why I chose this topic. While release management overall is a fairly mature field in software development, within Microsoft Dynamics CRM, due to the uniqueness of the platform, this topic is fairly new and is not covered in as much detail as, let's say, other topics around CRM development or managing CRM deployments. So again, no matter how good code we develop, it's very important how we're going to deploy to downstream environments and how we're going to manage that process. So this is a topic that has interested me over a period of time, and I've done a lot of work in this area, so I'm very excited to share my knowledge and findings with the community. I'm going to start with a quick overview of what release management is outside of CRM. And in a nutshell, this is a set of processes that ensure that releases can be reliably planned, scheduled, and successfully deployed to target environments. I'm going to use this framework as we examine how we manage releases for Microsoft Dynamics CRM. So we start with source code. We run something that we're going to call a build process. This is standard terminology, obviously, where we take the source code and prepare deployment packages. Then we take the deployment packages, and through a deployment process, we then deploy it to target environments. We're going to talk about specifically how we work with the build process and the deployment processes for Microsoft Dynamics CRM for the majority of this presentation. This approach and this thinking comes from software development, from .NET custom development, and one of the resources I've included at the end of the presentation is a tutorial on release management for custom web applications, .NET web applications, which a lot of the concepts I feel are very important for CRM development as well. I knew I was probably going to digress a little bit on the previous slide, so this one is to bring me back on topic. Release management, again, consists of two key sub-processes: build, which is just the creation of deployment packages, and deployment, which is the installation of deployment packages in downstream target environments. An important aspect of these two sub-processes is that they are usually executed by different actors. While builds are typically executed by the development team, deployments are executed by administrators or a configuration management team. in larger organizations. So there are different actors with different knowledge and understanding of the system, so these processes need to be tailored to address the actors who are executing them. Release management, both build and deployment, consume the output of your development effort. So it's very important to have a tight integration between the development and configuration management teams or your administrators to make sure all parties are on the same page and the output of development can be easily incorporated into builds and deployments, and that those deployments are being executed correctly by the configuration management teams. Another important aspect of release management that we should always keep in the back of our minds is that it's not just about pushing code to production, it's about planning what's going to be released, the change management associated with that, and establishing the traceability to requirements, to defects, and so on and so forth. So these are all key components of release management. Now, when we talk specifically about CRM, the first key aspect that we have to solve is how are we going to manage our CRM metadata in source control in order to execute a build process that starts from source control, as we described earlier. First of all, let me clarify what I mean by CRM metadata. These are the definitions of your CRM entities, forms, views, etc., workflows, dashboards, security roles, and a few additional customization files. What's unique about these customization components, they are all stored in tables in the Microsoft CRM database, which can be modified with CRM customization tools. And then they can be exported in a solution. Now, within the solution, there's one single XML, very large XML file called customizations XML that contains all of this metadata. Okay. So what's the problem with CRM metadata that we need to solve? The only supported method, as I mentioned, to modify CRM metadata is to use the Microsoft Dynamics CRM customization tools. Once customizations are implemented, we can export them to a solution package, and that very much sounds like a build. So maybe that's our build, right? We have a deployment package that then we can deploy to downstream environments. And a lot of organizations in the early days of CRM development and implementations use that approach. But that approach creates a number of problems. So the thinking has evolved as to how we execute builds and deployments, and that's what we are going to talk about in more detail today. Let's look at some of the challenges that taking something directly out of development, making changes, exporting them, and moving it to downstream environments presents. The first challenge is the CRM environment is not a source control environment. There is no auditing for CRM metadata changes in CRM 2011 and, to my knowledge, in CRM 2013 either. So we cannot know who made a change to the CRM metadata or when they made that change. These are basic things that we can learn from a source control environment. Another very important question is the question of why. Why was a certain change made? So that's something that, that's the traceability that we need, that a proper team development environment such as Team Foundation Server gives us. We can say that specific changes were tied to work items, which in turn were tied to features and requirements or to defects. So we know why we made a change. So that's that holistic view that we need to have of our release, and that we cannot have if we just simply export out of customizations out of our CRM environment and move them, development environment, and move them downstream. Also, this presents a challenge with concurrent or parallel development, especially acute in scenarios where we are already in production and we have critical fixes that we have to address as soon as possible, while at the same time we are working on additional features and enhancements. So down the road, we obviously need to merge those two streams, and within a CRM environment, it's hard to manage that easily, and it's also very hard to merge code later if you're doing it in separate CRM organizations. Last but not least, because of the ease of customization, which is something that we all have used extensively and is one of the great strengths of the CRM platform, that ease also can result in unintended or unauthorized changes to CRM metadata. Maybe not malicious, but unintentional. Sometimes we remove a field from a form, we remove a field, we do one of those types of things, and there's no way to establish, due to the lack of traceability, who did this or why. So these are, again, the types of things and history that a proper source control environment gives us. So in order to solve these challenges, what I'm proposing and what has been the evolution or transformation in the thinking within the CRM community is that we need a build and deployment process that looks more like this. So we conduct development in one or more development environments. Then all of our changes go from there into source control. And then from there, we execute our build and we build our solutions and push them to target environments. And I've listed some sample target environments. It's not necessary that everyone has the same set of environments. So the key development, the key tool that allows us to manage our CRM metadata in source control is the Solution Packager. A brief history: the Solution Packager was released in August 2012 with update rollup 10 for CRM 2011, and it aims to resolve the challenges with CRM metadata that I just described. I've listed here a couple of specific resources for anyone who needs to get up to speed on this tool. It is included in the CRM SDK, so everybody should have it. How does the Solution Packager help us? More specifically, as described in the SDK, the Solution Packager will identify the individual components that are in that compressed large XML file and in the zipped solution as a whole and extract them into individual files. This is referred to as an unpack, and the individual files now can be changed into source control. So now in source control, you don't have one large XML file, but you have small granular files that represent, let's say, your contact entity or your main account form. So you can really track who made what changes at that granular level, which allows you to have proper source control practices. In addition to that, because metadata changes are now decomposed into smaller individual components, it's easier for developers to work on different components and check them independently without stepping on each other. It also, within source control, you can do some merging of changes potentially, although you always have to keep in the back of your mind that the only proper way to modify CRM metadata is in a CRM environment. So any merging needs to be done carefully if you're doing it directly in source control. So once we have all that data in source control, the Solution Packager can help us recreate the solution file from these individual decomposed files by packing the files. And what's important about this capability is it can be invoked from an automated build process. So we can now have automated builds that we're executing periodically. Now, in order to use the the Solution Packager in the development process, we need to think about how that fits within our CRM development. First of all, we need to start by managing our unpacked solution in source control and start very early on as soon as we set up our solution. And then once we have that in place, then let's say we are in development. So a CRM developer needs to make a change to a certain component. Let's say we want to add a new field to the contact entity because that's what our requirements call for. So what a developer would do, he or she will go in, check out the contact entity's XML, and then they go ahead and then now they've reserved it, just like we would with a custom component. Then they make the change in CRM, Then they need to export a solution that contains this entity, unpack it, and check the modified component back into source control. This is one area that presents an ideal opportunity for automation where we can script the solution export and unpack operation. The reason for that is this adds a little bit of overhead to the development process. Certainly, it's a lot easier to just dive in CRM and make that change, which is appropriate in some scenarios, but in this case, we certainly want to make sure that that doesn't happen. We need to have a solid process in place where developers understand that when they make changes, what they need to check out and check back in. And also keep in mind that as they add new components or remove components from CRM metadata, a parallel operation needs to happen in TFS because the things are now disconnected a little bit. Now, from an automation perspective, the CRM SDK offers an excellent code sample for us already, where with an easy solution export request and a few lines of code, we can export our solution. So this code can be used either in a custom command line utility that you set up to support your build process, or in a PowerShell commandlet, or maybe even in a TFS custom activity that fits into the TFS build engine. So very simple code. It's available in the SDK. In this presentation is hyperlinked, and I did see a question. We intend to make this presentation available, so you can get this content and additional content that is included. Okay, so let's have a quick poll here. What we have in this presentation is I have about 6 polls. I want to gather what is your experience and with these tools. The first question is, do you use the solution packager to unpack solutions and check CRM metadata in source control? We intend to also make the results available to everyone, which should help you understand how your practices compare to other people who attend this webinar, so that you can learn if there are areas where you can make improvements or you're on par with everyone else.
Okay. I'm going to now close the poll. I'll give everyone about 5 more seconds if they want to answer. You should see the poll on the lower right of the screen, and we will close it now. It's going to take a few seconds to calculate here, and I will show the results to everyone. So Ivan, you may want to just move on here. We need about another 10 seconds before I can show the results.
No problem. Okay. So we can also look at the results at the end of the presentation. Maybe that would be a great way to close the session. Okay. So as we go towards a process where we manage more of our metadata into source control, an important aspect is to be able to frequently reset your development environments. If you're managing and releasing directly out of a development environment, what you'll frequently see that your development environment becomes very important and very sacred, and you can't make changes to it. Now, with managing your CRM metadata in source control becomes the gold source of what your CRM metadata is, so development environments become expendable. Frequent resets to a development environment help you address a couple of key issues. For example, development environments are never stale, and deprecated customizations are wiped out when you reset an environment. So you don't have to worry about someone restoring something you already removed because their development environment still contains that definition. Sometimes, though, rebuilding an environment can take a really long time. So although on-demand resets of a development environment sound great, it is probably better if you have large customization files and so on and so forth to schedule a nightly build and reset that generates a new development environment using the latest CRM metadata out of source control, and then make that database backup to developers. Then they can use the import organization feature to very quickly refresh their environment. When it comes to resetting development environments, there are two options. You can certainly implement custom tools and processes, and I have done that. You can also use the ADX Studio ALM Toolkit, which is an excellent tool that allows you to very quickly provision an organization, set up users in it, import customizations, and import data as well. So there's a lot of value in terms of supporting the development process there. Okay. So the next topic that I'm going to cover now that we've established what we'll need to do from a development perspective to support this type of release management process is how we can build and deploy from source control. Now, in order to build CRM metadata, as I already covered during development, we make changes during the customizations tool, and then we export, unpack, and check everything in source control. During a build, we get the latest definitions from source control, and then we pack them into a solution using the solution packager. The output of this pack operation is then our solution or deployment package in more general terms that we're going to deploy to downstream environments. There's a slightly different process when we're building custom code components, such as plugins, custom workflow activities, web resources. I personally recommend using the CRM Developer Toolkit for developing these components. Specifically for plugins, there's a great advantage because your plugin registrations, which are essentially CRM metadata, are now stored in source control. There is no other good way of managing those definitions in source control unless you also check in your plugin solution and unpack it. When you unpack it, your plugin registrations will also be in source control. Now, during a build, you need to get your custom code components from source control. You need to build your either custom Visual Studio solution or CRM Developer Toolkit solution using MS Build. And then you need to incorporate these custom code components. Obviously, for web resources, there's no build. For JavaScript web resources, there's no build. For Silverlight, you'll still have a build if you're still using Silverlight. So now then, these custom components need to make it into a solution file, and you have two options. If you're using the developer toolkit, you can deploy, and this is a little bit more of the old process. You can deploy your CRM developer toolkit solutions to a build environment, CRM environment, and then export them. Export that solution, and then you have a deployment package. But the solution packager has an interesting feature called that can be invoked with a map switch, and then you can provide a mapping file that allows you to get your custom code components from another location other than the folders within the solution. So you can get, let's say, a custom plugins DLL, not from the solution folder structure, but from a folder where you've just compiled your plugin Visual Studio solution. So during build, you can use that feature. It's documented in the solution packager reference. So now your custom components, you don't have to one-time check the source code into TFS and then unpack and check them a second time. You can do this only once and just get the real source when you do a build. Now, in terms of how we trigger a build, there's a couple of options. You can use custom tools to run your build, command line utilities, PowerShell, or you can leverage the TFS build engine. The TFS build engine obviously does not know much about CRM or how we do CRM builds, but especially with TFS 2012, you can write what are essentially custom workflow activities, just like you would for CRM, to extend the TFS build engine to do tasks that are specific to CRM builds. There's a great tool out there which has appeared recently called the CRM CI framework, and I have a link to that great resource at the end of the presentation as well, which shows you already how to create those it already has created custom workflow activities that interact with CRM, that allow, the TFS build engine to interact with CRM, and then it has sample definitions of builds, parameterized builds where you can create your own build processes, or you can create your completely custom build definitions using some of those capabilities. So you certainly have options as to how to execute the build process. From a deployment perspective, now let's say we've already done a build, we have our solution files, now we need to push them to downstream environments. It is beneficial to automate the solution import process, and in some areas, in some more complex implementations, I've run in scenarios where manual solution imports or manual changes to downstream environments is not allowed, so the process has to be scripted. The development team, in addition to the deployment packages, needs to create deployment scripts that will have the functionality necessary to import the solutions into downstream environments. One very easy way to import a solution is to use a sample from the CRM SDK, again, in order to create a command line utility that imports solutions in downstream environments. Or the ADX Studio, I apologize to the ADX team for the spelling error there. The ALM toolkit also has the facility to import solutions through PowerShell. Okay, another quick poll. Do you use the solution packager to pack solutions from source control, maybe TFS, maybe use something else for source control during a build?
Okay, that poll is now open. And Yvonne, I can kind of update you on the results from the last one, which will probably inform this poll. 62% said to the question, do you use a solution packager to unpack solutions and check, I was trying to read the whole question here, and check CRM metadata. 62% said no, 16% said yes. And as this poll runs, maybe we'll give it another 10 seconds or so here. The answers are coming in. I can tell you how those results will come in, but it's looking like, again, less people are saying yes than no. Why don't we close out the results and show those now? Well, it'll take a few seconds for people to display it, but I can tell you it's 51% are saying no, 8% are saying yes, and other people are either not answering or saying unsure.
Yes. Right. If we're not using the solution packager to unpack and check in our data, we won't be able to obviously use them during a build. So that's expected. Okay, let's proceed. This certainly raises some interesting questions as to what are the challenges out there that people have run into when they use the solution packager. But for this, it's going to be a separate question we'll address later. In terms of build and deployment and release management, automation comes a very important part. So I wanted to briefly touch upon how we can automate these processes. Why do we want to automate first? Productivity gains. We can execute builds and deployments faster with less manual effort if we automate. That allows us to run builds and deployments more frequently, which has been known to result in improved quality. So that's if you're looking to improve overall quality of your solution, this is an important step you can take. In terms of frequency, how frequently you're going to run automated builds, there's one option to run a daily or nightly build, where you get the latest overnight at the end of the development day when developers are done. You get latest, you do a build, and then you deploy it in a build integration environment. Continuous builds are popular in custom development, and that simply means that if every time you check in a component, you trigger a build. Because the build process for CRM typically takes quite a bit of time, continuous build is appropriate to check if custom code components compile, such as your plugins or custom workflow activities. but they are a little harder to implement if there are multiple people making changes to CRM metadata and checking them in. I've seen more frequently the usage of daily builds as opposed to continuous builds with CRM. Now, what are our automation options? Custom command line utilities and scripts with a little help from the CRM SDK is one option. PowerShell scripts and utilities are another. Obviously that expects that you have your created PowerShell commandlets that then can be invoked from PowerShell that interact with CRM. And then the third option, as I talked about, is the TFS build engine. So in terms of build automation, what are the key pieces that you need to take advantage of? First of all, Visual Studio comes with a utility called tf.exe if you're using TFS, and that allows you to programmatically interact with TFS and get source code out of TFS. So that's going to be, if you're using TFS, that's going to be an important tool you need to leverage. Second, if you have custom code in Visual Studio projects, plugins, custom workflow activities, etc., you need to compile those. So you're going to need to use MS Build. You can also use MS Build to deploy in a scripted fashion CRM developer toolkit solutions to a CRM environment. That's another way you can use MS Build. Now, once you have your source and you have compiled your custom code, you need to pack CRM solutions using the solution packager. The map switch is going to help you map to the custom source or compile code, and that creates your CRM solutions. There can be a couple of issues that you may run into when you pack solutions. Build automation is important in order to help you catch problems with solution packs early in the process. So if you're doing a nightly build, you know that same day that the previous day something went wrong. You don't have to wait until you want to release to a downstream environment to find out that something has gone wrong. In addition to that, when you add or remove components from a solution, as I mentioned earlier, that requires a parallel source control operation. So you add a new form to the contact entity. When you unpack and check in the contact entity in source control, that's not going to, the form's not going to end up automatically there. So you need to do something to educate your developers that additions and removals of components require them to do the same thing in TFS. That's where good practices and procedures for a development team become very important when using the solution packager. Another tip from my experience is to avoid including system components that are not customizable in your solutions. Since they cannot change and they are system components, they will be in all of your downstream environments anyway. But I've seen on a couple of occasions, and I've seen questions on message boards, why am I getting an error when I try to repack saying that a system component is missing from the solution? What happens is the solution packager does not unpack system components that are not customizable. So when you try to repack, all of a sudden they're missing. You don't need them anyway, so just don't include them in your solutions. One other consideration to think about is when and how you want to increment the solution version during the build. Do you want to assign the next, a new version to the solution after a build before you do a release? The XRM CI framework has the capability to do that by manipulating the solution version in the solution XML file before it gets packed. So that's a concern. If you're not using that tool, you may want to manually increment the solution version of your solutions before a build, or find another way to increment the version in the solution.xml file. So when you unpack a solution, there's a file called solution.xml, which contains information specific to the solution. That's where you need to set the version correctly if you're incrementing. Next question, do you currently have an automated build process for CRM solutions?
Okay, that question is open and running now, and let's give that another about 10 seconds for people to answer. And to anyone wondering about whether we're recording today, we are in fact recording this session, and it will be made available for viewing later. So the results are in. I'm not sure if you're able to see them or not, but we have, again, a 57% no and 9% yes. Do you currently have an automated build process?
Okay. All right, let's proceed. So now if we have automated our build process, we also want to think about how we add deployment automation, and this would be the installation of CRM solutions in downstream environments. There is a very easy and simple sample in this CRM SDK that I've included here, and it is hyperlinked, that allows you to get a custom solution zip file and import it into a CRM environment. So you can create your, again, custom command line utilities, or you can use one of the tools available out there in order to import a solution in downstream environments. Now, if you are scripting the solution import process, one important capability you lose is the clear visibility of when a solution import fails and why. And that is one reason that prevents a lot of implementers from implementing automated process for deployment. One lesson that I'd like to share is that you can use the the import job entity to get at the log file for a solution import. So when you go through a solution import process, at the end you're offered the opportunity to download an Excel file that is the log for the solution import. When you look at solutions in CRM, typically you do not see a place where you can see the history of all solution imports. So it's not apparent that that exists, but every single solution import of a solution is stored in the import job entity. You can then implement, if you're going to script the import process, then you can also script the generation of the same log file that you would get if you at the end of the solution import wizard. This contains how long it took the solution to import, the components that were imported, the status of each component, making sure every component imports successfully, and finally any errors. So if there's an error, there's a detailed, more detailed error description of why the import of a specific component failed. So it's important if you're scripting deployment after the deployment finishes to check these log files and make sure that they are everything went in successfully. And then I also recommend checking those in source control along with your deployment packages and having that as a proof, yes, we successfully deployed the solution version in this environment. Here is a very quick code sample with what is probably a contender for one of the longest request names in the CRM platform, the retrieve formatted import job results request, which allows you to retrieve that Excel file that you'd otherwise get from the import wizard. So you just need the import job ID, which you will get when you import the solution, and then you just get that, essentially that Excel file, which you can save somewhere in the file system along with your solution file. Very simple and easy example to help you with that automation. Okay, So now let's find out how we deploy solutions in target environments. Do we do manual imports using the solution import wizard, or do we have a scripted solution import process?
Okay, so the answers are coming in here. I'd also remind folks, if they want to share other thoughts on this topic, you can definitely use the chat just above to add any other insight that you have or any other input that you want to share with Yvonne. Okay, about 5 more seconds and we'll close this poll out.
I would certainly be very interested to hear from those of you who answered that you're not using the solution packager. If you can give us a reason of why you're not using the solution packager. Have you run into any challenges? Do you have any concerns? It would be very interesting to hear those concerns.
Okay, so are you able to see those results?
Yes. It sounds like 54% said that they are using a manual solution import. Only about 6% have scripted the solution import process. Okay, interesting results, but it's certainly in line with what we heard about the use of solution packager earlier. Okay, so I'm going to proceed to the next topic. This is how do we verify builds? And what this refers to, typically build verification will come right after we automate a build and before we deploy. So in this case, we want to make sure that before we push anything to downstream environments, it meets certain criteria. The checklist that I would like to use to verify builds starts with first, can we compile our custom code? If we are using test-driven development and we have created unit tests for our custom code components, which is something I strongly encourage, and in fact, on the application services blog, one of my coworkers, Lucas Alexander, is starting a long series of posts specifically on unit testing for CRM. But if you use this, this is a very important gate check to tell you, did this succeed, or do we have a good build or not? Now, if custom code compiled and then we passed unit tests, we can move on and pack our solutions. So as I discussed earlier, there are some scenarios where we don't end up with a successful pack. So then we need to make sure that we address those issues. That's the next check. Then once we have solution files that are ready, that's our core build process, if you will. But solutions, as I'm sure you've experienced in the past, tend to sometimes not import successfully in a target environment. A very common scenario is we want to change the data type of a field. We delete the old field, we re-add the field with the same name and a different data type. This all works fine in development. When we try to import the solution in another environment that already has the field with a different data type, the CRM platform does not like that very much, and it throws an error. So these types of problems we cannot detect during a build. So what I advocate is having a build integration environment. And after you do a build, push your solutions that you just created into that environment. So that environment you're always going to maintain on the last good version that is deployed in your target environments. And you can refresh that very quickly. And after you do a build, you import those solutions. If your solutions import successfully in this build integration environment that has the same set of customizations, now you know that if you push a solution downstream, there's a very good chance that it's going to succeed. The only reason it may not is for purely environmental factors, not enough SQL Server resources, those types of things. These are very rare and few and far in between. This is a very important check to give you peace of mind and comfort when you're deploying to downstream environments. And once you know that purely mechanically we've been able to execute the build and it's going to import successfully in the downstream environment, the last question we want to ask to verify our build is, do we pass our functional tests? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This is certainly not a session where we have enough time to cover this in a ton of detail, but it's a very important topic even if you're just interacting with a separate test team to have a solid understanding of your options. So in terms of functional tests, I've seen two different execution methods, either manual tests, meaning someone logs into CRM and executes certain tests to make sure that the functionality is working as expected, or you can have automated validation. So some form of either a coded UI test as available in Visual Studio, or another type of testing tool. And the important point about these automated testing tools is that for CRM, they need to be able to test the user interface. So you can make sure that even the CRM application forms are functioning successfully, not just custom code components or the CRM platform. Now, in terms of how extensive testing you conduct, there are three types of tests, at least three types of tests. Delta tests refer to testing simply the changes that you have introduced. So if we fixed a defect, we want to make sure that now that defect works in the environment where we applied the build. If we are introducing a new feature, that will be a Delta test will just test that new feature. Smoke tests now go above and beyond that, and they only test typically key functionality to ensure that we haven't broken anything big. Once we know that, right, so we'll test only during a smoke test the several core processes that we deem are very important and we have prioritized. Finally, we can have integration tests that will really test all core functionality in the application to ensure that the new build has not broken anything. Automation is a very important piece here, because it will dictate how extensive testing you can conduct. The more manual your test process is, the more likely it is that you're not going to be conducting as extensive testing. It's going to require a lot of time and effort. So automation, if you want to have comfort in the quality of what you're deploying, is a very important factor. So even if you are not in charge of that, of testing on your team, it's a very important thing to keep in mind. You can do absolutely everything correct in terms of building and deploying solutions. In order to have good quality, you also need good functional tests. The next question is, how do you currently validate a build? Do you have manual tests, automated tests? Do you do a mix of both? Frequently for Delta tests, you'll still be doing manual tests, while for either smoke tests or integration tests, you may automate.
Okay, we'll give about 5 more seconds here to get your answers in. And let me share those results. So, Yvonne, can you see those?
Yes, one moment. No, I do not see the results yet.
Okay, the results are 46% report doing manual validation, 2% automated tests, and 11% say both.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't think there is a right or wrong answer here as with anything else. I do not believe that there's a right answer for any of these processes or best practices, as long as you have something that meets your needs. If you're doing manual testing, I, however, strongly encourage that you have a well-documented script that you go through when you're conducting manual testing. I've seen a number of scenarios where these tests are done randomly, and they don't, depending on who's executing the test, they can be great and very thorough, or they can be a little arbitrary and important defects or issues introduced by a build are missed. So if you have a well-documented process for what to test, and how to test it. Even if you're doing it manually, you can have very good results. Okay, we're moving towards the end. The last big topic that I wanted to discuss is data. And data is an important part of the release. So there are three major types of data that I wanted to discuss here that are of interest for CRM deployments. I was struggling to find a good name. I call it the security model. I've also used the term organization structure, but in reality what this data is, these are your business units, your teams, your users, and the links between them. Also the links from teams and users to security roles and field security profiles. This is data, very specialized data in the CRM database that is crucial to the functioning of your system. So how that data is going to end up in your target environments, in addition to any code, is very, very important. It's important, if possible, to import that data rather than create it manually in each environment. There are samples in the Deploying Microsoft Dynamics CRM through Test and Production Environments white paper, which I have hyperlinked at the end. That white paper contains excellent samples on how to import those records. If you are automating the import of those records, one of the key things that you can do is to preserve consistent IDs of business units and teams, especially. Also, sometimes there are system user, service accounts or core users as opposed to just regular users, where that may be referenced in processes, in views, notifications, etc. So if the IDs of those records change from one environment to the next, you will have to perform manual steps at the end of each solution import to fix the references to either a team or a business unit. Queues, by the way, fall in the same category. So you need to be able to force the IDs of those records in downstream environments if possible. If you cannot automate this process in smaller deployments, I've seen scenarios where these records are first created in one environment, and in other environments are spawned from a database backup of the original environment. That doesn't work very well always, so the preferable approach is if you can just script the import of those records. Ideally, you want to have a method to work around that problem. Otherwise, you're going to have expensive manual effort at the end of each deployment, and ideally, you want to avoid that. The second type of data is called usually configuration or master data. This is data in custom CRM entities. Obviously, it's very easy to create additional CRM entities to store information. And typically, this is low volume. You won't see a lot of records in a configuration entity, but it's very important, or master data, but it's very important to keep that, to manage that data carefully. The reason you want to manage in source control and import it, export from one environment and propagate it to all your other environments using standard tools is that you want to, again, preserve consistent IDs, because these records may be referenced in processes, in CRM views, and so on and so forth. So if your IDs are consistent, you again won't have that manual steps at the end of each solution import. While the ADX Studio LM Toolkit does not have a facility, to my knowledge, to import business units and users and teams, you can use it to import configuration data, regular CRM records that are in custom entities. You can also create your custom tools using the standard messages, create, update, and so on in the CRM platform to manage those records consistently across environments. So that's another type of data that you need to think about and make sure that you have a consistent, solid process for moving it to other environments. The import wizard in CRM will help you maintain the data, the same types of records, the same records, but it won't keep the same IDs, and that's where the pain point is. Okay, so the last type of data that I wanted to cover is sample data, specifically needed for your development environment and possibly your test environments. These are your regular transaction records. Let's say in a typical CRM scenario, you're going to have accounts and contacts, opportunities, leads, and so on and so forth. So for sample data, you need limited volume of that data in order to be able to have a fully functional environment that you can then run automated tests on or start development on. So your developers always have consistent data that they're developing against that's developed to certain expectations. Obviously, for solid development, you need your data and your code to work in sync, and providing sample data is a great step towards that. Now, a best practice that I recommend is that you ask your designers during design, once they create an entity that meets certain requirements, you can very easily export to Excel template for creating new records and have them create a few sample records that shows how the data needs to look. This forces them to also think how, not only on the fields that they need, but what the data will really look like. Maybe they will look at some source data to create your sample data and so on and so forth. What I find is an additional benefit is that results in better, higher quality design. If you force your designers to think about what the layout of the data, not just the fields, but what specific examples should look like. And then they are on the same page and the developers are on the same page. So you want to manage that data in source control. You may want to import that data using the import wizard. Consistent IDs in this case are less important, as long as the links between the records are preserved when you import it in a target environment. But if you're going to be automating the import of master data, you may as well use the same tools to import sample data as well. Okay, so last poll, is data included in your build and deployment processes today?
We're going to close out this poll now, and hopefully the results will share. So we have a much more even split on this one, Yvonne. We have, is data included? 29% say no, 35% say yes.
Okay, all right, so that's certainly one area where we're incorporating that into our build and deployment processes more. Okay, so we are almost running out of time, so I wanted to cover at the very end some of the tools and resources that I've discussed: the CRM Developer Toolkit, the MS Build, custom command line utilities to import or export solutions, and also the ADX Studio ALM Toolkit. Here are links to the resources that I also discussed. There are two very good white papers from Microsoft. The one on deploying Microsoft Dynamics CRM from development through test in production environments has been around for a while. The ALM for Microsoft Dynamics CRM 2011 CRM Solution Lifecycle Management is newer, so I'm bringing that to your attention as well if you haven't seen it. This is a very good tutorial on deploying web applications in enterprise scenarios. This is specifically for custom .NET solutions. All the custom websites, Windows Communication Foundation services, database components. These things may be of interest to you because if you have a lot of the more complex CRM implementations may also contain these custom components. So as you're thinking about automating builds and deployments, you want to know how to do those as well. So this is a real step-by-step guide on this topic. And finally, third-party tools, the ADX Studio LM Toolkit. This is a solution from ADX that comes with a small license fee. And also the XRM CI framework is a very excellent tool specifically for TFS 2012 that shows you how to do CRM builds entirely out of TFS. Okay, we have just 1 minute. I wanted to look at some of the questions and see if we can answer as many as we can, and then we'll save the rest and see if we can answer them later.
Sure. So yeah, really as many as you have time for, Ivan. There are quite a few questions that have come in, some really good ones throughout the session here. And I don't know if you can see them or if you would like me to maybe read them off for you. It's really however you'd prefer.
I think I can see the questions.
All right.
The first one from Sean Schreier is, I have heard that the solution formats will change with CRM 2011. Will tools like the solution packager be upgraded for the next release? I definitely believe so. I'm pretty sure that the solution packager is continuing to be included in the CRM SDK. Obviously, a great development in the future to watch out for is if any improvements in terms of auditing CRM metadata and so on are included with future versions beyond CRM 2013. But very much the solution packager for the time being is going to be the tool that we will going to need to use. A question from Terry Storer. We have been warned to only publish customizations during off hours because the metadata refresh brings our network to a standstill. Have you experienced this, heard of it? Okay. Yes, I don't believe that it taxes your network. It does tax heavily your CRM servers. Importing and publishing CRM customizations is probably some of the heaviest lifting that you're going to ask your CRM environment to do. As a result, frequently you may run into performance issues, timeouts, and things like that when you import solutions. It is not by chance that the KB article from Microsoft on extending timeouts on the CRM platform references timeouts when you import customizations. So this is very much something that you want to do enough hours when they're not users using the system. They will experience performance degradation or the system may become unusable. Another question from Sean. Can you explain how to get code coverage of plugins with unit testing? Are fakes the only way? Yes. So obviously plugins interact a lot with the CRM platform. So to create effective unit tests, you have to quote unquote trick them or fake them into thinking that they are running in the CRM platform and not within a unit test. There is a growing body of information on this subject. There is a great blog post that I like from Mark Schweigert that's almost a year old now that described this. There are other blog posts in the subject. As I mentioned, one of my coworkers on the HP Application Services blog is also going to blog about that. But yes, if you're using Visual Studio 2012, the short answer is you probably want to go with fakes. Yes. How do you handle power users? For example, users making codeless customizations using the CRM's declarative model. I see this requirement getting bigger with CRM 2011. Well, honestly, in the larger enterprise deployments, and my view is certainly skewed from that perspective, since these are the types of projects that I've worked on recently, is that If you want to have a solid deployment that meets enterprise standards, you really want to treat any of those customizations as development as well. It certainly adds overhead. It makes things slower, but in large systems, you want to be very careful as to who makes those changes, because they can impact how people do their job on a daily basis significantly, and you want to have the proper change management around that process. Just because it's very easy to make those changes in CRM doesn't mean that you shouldn't implement a process around them. Now, in smaller implementations, on the other hand, you may want to ease that requirement a little bit in order to allow your users to move more quickly and be more agile, but you have to be aware that these are things that can cause problems. Last question, how do you handle deletes, for example, attributes that are no longer used? Okay, that's another good question. So solution imports, the installation of CRM deployment packages is an additive process. So things that are not included in the solution are not automatically deleted. You need to develop separate processes to remove any deprecated entities, attributes, so on and so forth. So the first step in this process will usually be that you will import a new solution that removes all dependencies on those fields. So if you want to delete a field, obviously the field can no longer appear in any forms and views is one simple example. So you're going to import a solution that clears all those dependencies and then script the deletion of that attribute, either through a custom utility through CRM SDK or through a tool such as the ADX ALM toolkit. You can there's already a commandlet in PowerShell that allows you to delete an attribute. So the key thing will be first start by removing any dependencies and then delete the field or entity. You certainly will have to clean things up that way. If you're using managed solution, that's a slightly different story, and it also requires essentially a holding solution in order to be able to remove an attribute. The answer to how you do that with managed solutions is included in the second white paper from Microsoft that I referenced. We are kind of running out of time, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but that's the place where you can look for that answer. I do not see any other questions.
Yeah, I do see a couple others that I was hoping we could get to here.
Yes, absolutely.
The chat area. So one is let me start with one. What kind of version control would you recommend using for CRM development?
So I'm thinking about what we are asked here in terms of versioning solutions, or
that's how I interpreted it, but.
So obviously you want to, there are solution numbers, so for each for each build you probably want to increment the last number, and then for major releases you want to version your solutions. It's really up to you, but use the solution version. I think it makes sense for every build to assign a new solution version internally, so that you have a record of that. A best practice, especially if you're using a tool such as the XRM CI framework, essentially every build goes into TFS, and the release builds that are going to go to downstream environments also go into TFS. So you have a complete record of all your versions, and you can recreate an environment at any version with a fairly reasonable effort. So keep your deployment packages all versioned. If you're not using an automated tool, simply manually create a folder for each release in your source control environment and put the files there and keep a full history. That, to me, is the most important takeaway from a versioning perspective.
Another question that came in, automating user creation with CRM Online. Is there any way to create users with specific GUIDs?
That is a good question. I'm not 100% sure if there is any anything unique with CRM Online. I've mostly worked recently with on-premise deployments. I want to say that you can use the same create method on the user entity that you would otherwise would, and that would force the ID to be consistent. Again, with any create method in the CRM platform, you can force the ID to be something specific. So I believe you should be able to do the same thing with the user. I'm just thinking of any of the complexities, especially recent complexities with CRM Online, and I apologize if I'm missing something there. But my initial reaction is yes, you can just import, execute a create message for the user entity and specify the ID.
We have one final question if you have another minute.
I absolutely do.
Great. What is your opinion on managed solutions in large enterprise deployments consisting of multiple applications on different release schedules?
Okay, so this is certainly a very interesting question. Sean McCarthy from ADX Studio did a presentation, I think, last November for the XRM Virtual User Group, and he talked about managed versus unmanaged solution in a lot of detail, and he expressed what I think is a view that a lot of us share. And that view is that managed solutions are better suited for ISVs who are creating a product, who want to publish their solution on the Microsoft Dynamics Marketplace, or who want to be able to uninstall a solution for whatever reason. Now, none of these criteria meet large enterprise deployments. I think I express a view shared by most enterprise people who work more in the enterprise space that you probably want to use unmanaged solutions and have very tight control. That gives you additional flexibility that you lose with managed solutions. Now, I will caution you that the Microsoft white paper on ALM for Microsoft Dynamics CRM 2011 recommends using managed solution. So you need to weigh their arguments versus the uniqueness of your situation to determine which way you want to go. But there are some limitations with managed solutions that continue to exist, and in enterprise implementation, you see them used less.
All right, that wraps up our Q&A. Thanks for staying a few minutes extra, Ivan, and to everyone in the audience. We have a little evaluation survey after you close out here. Please take 30 seconds to answer that. Our speakers really appreciate it, and we'd like to know how your experiences have been on this webcast platform. Ivan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right, and thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us too. We really appreciate your questions and your participation. So thanks, and have a great day.